The ACC kickoff is this week, and that means more college football talk and previews. We're going to look at what position on Boston College needs to step up the most in 2022. I'm going to get into all the nuances and dive into a deep dive on this position on today's Locked On Boston College.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Boston College. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. I'd like to thank LinkedIn for being the official college football recruiting sponsor across the Locked On College Network. LinkedIn Jobs help you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. All right, so it is ACC kickoff week. I know we're all really excited to hear what Jeff Hafley has to say, Phil Dracovic, Josh DeBerry, and Zay Flowers. They're all the representatives from Boston College heading to the event. And as part of the ACC kickoff, you also get the media voting on their prediction for Boston College. And I'm recording this ahead of time, but I'm going to guess BC is probably like 4th or 5th in the ACC. I'm guessing in the ACC Atlantic. I'm guessing that's where they're going to put them. That's usually around the sweet spot of where the media thinks BC is going to land. And to be truthful, they haven't done enough to show that they deserve more than that, right? So I can't get mad about that. But you look at the team. You have Phil Dracovic, quarterback, who's going to be a first-round draft pick next year. Write that in your books. You got Zay Flowers, who, no matter what Pro Football Focus says, is a top wide receiver in the country. They had a top 25 listing of wide receivers in the country, and Zay Flowers didn't make that list. Thought that was completely absurd, but I'm not going to get a whole episode ranting about Pro Football Focus. And you have the third-ranked secondary coming back. So you have all these strong points with BC, which leaves the question marks, right? We've talked at length about the offensive line. We know that there's a huge question mark with 0 returners and 5 new starters at that position. What is the biggest group that needs to take that big jump, though? The offensive line is not going to be their answer today because we don't even know what they're capable of doing. I can't say they're going to take a jump because I'm not sure what their ceiling is, what they're like. What's their mistakes? Where do they struggle? I don't know any of that because it's 5 guys other than Jack Conley, who has played here or there, that we really don't know much about. The group that is returning everybody that I think needs to take that next step, and I think it's someone a lot of you guys will also agree with, is that defensive line. They go with that 4-3 defense. You have 2 defensive ends, or edges if you want to call them, and then 2 defensive tackles, a nose tackle and a defensive tackle. They have to play better. This is a group that last year was a liability at times. You know, you look at the stats and you can kind of fudge it a little bit to make the defensive line look good. Like saying, hey, we had the 4th ranked or 3rd ranked passing defense in the country. Yeah, you did. But is that because of the defensive line or is that because of the secondary? And I will die on that hill to say it was the secondary that did most of that because it is linked specifically with the pass rush, which was 92nd, I believe, in the country in sacks last year. BC was not good at getting at the quarterback. They just could not do it consistently. And I think that is a major concern heading into next year. We're going to start with just the pass rush, right? When you look at that front 4, who would you say is the best pass rusher on this defense? I mean, you may say Marcus Valdez. He's probably the most accomplished, but is he a game changer? I don't think so. As I've said on this podcast before, Marcus Valdez to me is the perfect defensive end or edge 2. Like he's not the guy that you want to anchor your defense, but he's also not the guy that you can sleep on. He does make plays here or there, but I love him at like if you had a stud defensive end across from him, I think Valdez would be perfect for that. And for me, especially in that pass rush, that is the biggest question. You're playing against some of the best quarterbacks that this school has seen in years. The quarterback play this year in the ACC is going to be off the charts. you're getting guys like Malik Cunningham, Sam Hartman. You're getting a supposedly improved DJ Uiagalelei from Clemson. So you're getting some of these Jordan Travis from Florida State. You're getting good quarterback play out there. You need a defensive line to challenge that. And I worry that if you can't get off the field, if your defense can't get to the pass rusher, that is a major problem and a major flaw in this team. Now, that being said, there is talent on this roster. As I said, Marcus Valdez is not someone to be slept on. And I have said all along, I need to see more from Shitta Sillah. Sillah is the bigger of the two defensive ends on this roster, but he hasn't been completely effective, I would say. And I don't think that's an unfair thing to say about Shitta Sillah. He's now heading into his 4th year with Boston College, in which he's played 40 games for the Eagles, and he has 4.5 sacks. 4.5 sacks over 4 years. Ugh, that's not going to do it, folks, and especially when I'm telling you need an elite end across from Marcus Valdez, or someone who can at least get to the quarterback. I just haven't seen it from Sillah yet. You haven't seen him be that guy. Now, he could be. I know he's been banged up a couple times, and he's got the size. He's 6'5". He's huge. He's, like 6 inches taller than Marcus Valdez. But we have not seen him do it yet. So I have to be worried a little bit about what he does this year. Or the other option is, does Boston College, cycle in some of the other players? And I think that's where I'm kind of at. We're going to get into our second segment. Looking at some of these other players that BC could cycle in and out at defensive end, that could give a spark that is very much needed at the defensive end position. Now, as the sun comes up and the small businesses are back in business, LinkedIn Jobs makes it easier to grow your team. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the people you want to interview faster and for free. Create a free job post in minutes on LinkedIn Jobs to reach your network and beyond to the world's largest professional network of over 810 million people. Then add your job in the purple hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring so your network can help you find the right people to hire. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. That's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Did you know every week nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn? Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. So, Locked On Boston College, AJ Black here. I'm the editor and publisher of 247's Eagle Insider. Check out my work there. We're looking at the defensive line, specifically right now the defensive end position, and the big concerns about this group, and what we need to see for this defense to be completely successful in 2022. Now, Marcus Valdez and Shitta Sillah are probably projected to be defensive end 1 and 2. They're going to be the starters unless stuff happens during camp. And I think that is a fair option for Jeff Hafley to look into. And I would not be surprised in the least to see at least 2 to 3 other defensive ends jump in to play significant minutes in this upcoming season. And they're guys that have been recruited by Jeff Hafley, brought here specifically because they fit his style of defense and Tem Lukabu's style of defense, which is he wants speed out there. And you look at the size of some of these guys, they're a little bit smaller than what you might expect from a defensive end, but Hafley is banking on speed and power, right? And these guys all have it. I think all 3 of these defensive ends or edges, if you want to call them that, because they can line up at outside linebacker as well, can do a whole bunch of different things with their speed. And so the first name that you're going to want to look at is Donovan Azaraku. He is a guy I think is going to start to slide into that defense much more this year. He played a lot in 2021 as a true freshman. He had played in 10 games. He had 21 total tackles, 10 solo, 14 assists. That doesn't make sense. 14 tackles solo, 7 assists. My math was not lining up there. From New Jersey, this is a sophomore. And he looked small, I have to say, in 2021. He was 6'2", and I think he was at like 220, but he's up, or 230. He's up much more than that. Last time I saw him was at the spring game, and he looked bigger, and I think that's good because I love Azaraku's speed. You don't want to take that away from him, but you also don't want him looking like a safety playing at defensive end because he looks smaller out there. But I love his upside, and I know the staff does too. Obviously, if you're throwing him out there to play this early, you have some faith in what he can do. And, you know, if he continues to build, he builds his muscles, he builds his size to go along with his speed, to go with his technique. I'm sure he's got technique work that he's going to do with Lokabu and defensive ends coach Vince Ogabase. You're going to see a guy that I think could be really talented at the defensive end position and a guy that's going to push to get more snaps. Because if Sillah is not getting to the quarterback and he's not getting to the running game, because the running game defense was not good either. As we saw last year, they got pushed around a lot. They finished 92nd in the country. So it's not just a pass rush issue. It's a running game issue. It's against mobile quarterbacks. They got to completely overhaul a lot of this. If they're not seeing the results or the step up from Sillah, you're going to want to get guys like Azaraku in there. You're going to want to see what he can do as an everyday starter. And I don't expect, I should say this right now, I don't expect like Shitta Sillah to be just like removed or Marcus Valdez to lose his job. That's not going to happen, right? What I do expect to happen is more situational football, right? So if you're seeing Sillah struggle against an offensive guard or tackle out there, and they're not stopping things, like on the offense, you're going to see Azaraku out there. Or if Hafley sees a favorable matchup with more of a speedy defensive end, you throw Azaraku out there, boom, you've got your moments there. And I love what Azaraku could produce. I see explosiveness out of him. But he's got a big upside to him. But the guy that I see, and I see star right away, and he played just a little bit, but we saw him make a huge play in 2021, is Nito Akpala from Georgia. Now, we have on the show talked a lot about how Jeff Hafley has gone out there and got track stars. And a lot of them are at wide receiver, cornerback. You see a lot of those, maybe a running back here or there. How about a defensive end that is a track star and one that is very good at it? Nito Akpala is 6'2", and I believe 240, so he's got the right size. And he has explosive written all over him. Now, if you want a guy that can get off the ball fast and get to the quarterback or the run ball, the ball carrier fast, I look at Akpala and go, he's the answer right there. Now, I have to say, other than some practice footage, you don't get to see a ton of him because he hasn't played a ton for BC yet. However, we did get to see a glimpse of what he could be for the Eagles against Clemson last year in Death Valley. Remember that game? That was the game where it was the first game where Dennis Grosel started to really struggle, and he could not move the ball at all. But BC's defense kept the Eagles in that game. And one of the crucial plays was actually done by the special teams. I got to give them credit. Akpala flew off the line of scrimmage and blocked a punt. I mean, if you go back and you watch that play again, you will be amazed at how fast Nito Akpala came off that line. He exploded. And now, is that exactly what you're looking for from your defensive ends? Absolutely. You need a guy that can get off that ball and fly to the quarterback. Because over the last couple of years, I don't think it's been a technique issue per se, but it's just that little lack of explosiveness. How many plays have you watched and you're like, oh my gosh, Marcus Valdez had that quarterback. He was just like an inch off. Or Shitta Sillah was just an inch off, or some of the other guys that were just that left a couple years ago. It seems like that's been the story for years. You need a guy that can fly and get to that quarterback, and I think that's Akpala. Now we're gonna have to wait to see if there's other issues that might make it a little bit more harder for him to get that explosiveness, whether it's strength or his move set for getting past an offensive lineman. There's obviously more than just speed when you're talking about a defensive end. You need the complete package. But man, when you're talking about raw talent and maybe the potential to be explosive, something Boston College has not had on the defensive end position since Zach Allen, you look at Nito Ekpala and you say, there's our man right there. That is a man that could do that for us. And so he's another option. And I expect he was mostly special teams last year. I expect to see more of him in 2022. And another guy who, I honestly say, he showed up in some practice reports and things like that, but he had a massive spring game and really stood out as like, okay, there's something there, is Ty Clemens, a redshirt freshman from Alabama. So you got a New Jersey guy in Azaraku, a Georgia guy in Okpala, an Alabama guy in Clemens. Clemens had 3 sacks, I believe, in the spring game, and looked every bit the part of a starting defensive end. And I know a lot of it was against the seconds, but when you're desperate for talent on that defensive end position, when your sacks are is not a part of your defense, is not something you can rely on, you need to start looking elsewhere on your roster to find maybe some sparks. And I said Okpala, Azaraku, those are both sparks. Those are guys that you can do that. Clemens has shown that he deserves it, that he deserves at least a look come this summer. And I think, I think that's a good thing. This is a good problem for BC to have right now. Because if Valdez or Shitta Sillah is not your answer, you now have at least 3 guys on your roster right now that I just named, and I'm sure Hafley and his staff might have other guys that I'm not even mentioning that could just jump right in and be an impact player, or a guy that could grow into an impact player. Because again, the one caveat with all 3 of those guys, Azaraku, Okpala, and Clemens, is they're all younger. They're redshirt freshmen, sophomores, things like that. So I think they're exciting. I think that they could help this the defensive end position take that next leap, to get some pressure on the quarterback, to stop the run attack, because they need to get some push up front. And that is something that sorely lacked last year. And speaking of push up front, in our final segment, I'm going to look in the middle of that defensive line. Let's dive into the defensive tackle position and why I think this year they could return to a more serviceable level than we saw them in 2021. BetOnline is your number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. At betonline.net, find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's NHL playoffs and Major League Baseball. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. And betonline.net remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports teams, including MMA, boxing, golf, and wrestling. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn about the trends in action. Head on over to BetOnline, where the game starts. Locked on Boston College, AJ Black. Later this week, we're going to talk about Jeff Hafley. We're entering year 3, and I want to look at what his ceiling and his floor could be in his career as we start to get into his recruits playing more for the Eagles. So we talked in the first 2 segments about the defensive ends, and this is more of a global talk about the defensive line and the struggles they had. As I said, they struggled against the pass, and they struggled against the run last year, both in the 90s and both. They need to, if BC is going to be more than a 6-6 or a 7-5 team, they're going to be a major part of that. They need to grow to become either comparable, like good, or just average. I mean, when you have talent like Phil Dracovic and Zay Flowers on the other side of the ball, and you have a good secondary behind you, average is fine. Honestly, folks, I don't need this. If you're expecting the defense to go from pass rushing of 90 to 10, and if that's not, you're going to start complaining about it. I think you're setting yourself up to failure. You want to see them take a step forward. For me, hey, if the defensive line can go from 90th in sacks to 50th, 55 in sacks, good step. That's average. That you can work with. It's not a liability. It's not a asset, but it's still it's an improvement. I think that is what you want to see this year. You want to see this defensive line just take that step that they need to do. Now, the middle of the line last year was interesting because at the beginning of 2021, Chibueze Onwuka, who was projected to be the starting nose tackle, goes out with an Achilles injury, he's gone for the year. You rely on Chris Banks and Cam Horsley and Isaiah Henderson to really anchor that defensive line. And for the most part, you saw things here and there, but were they completely effective? I don't think so. You didn't see what you saw in 2020 when Onwuka and Ram were really your, and Horsley too, were your real center assets. Now Ram is gone. TJ Ram is, I believe, in the CFL now, and you're going to have Onwuka back, which is great. When I talked about this defense just getting to a serviceable level, I think that's what Onwuka does well. He'll get you plays here and there. Is he the next coming of BJ Raji? No. But is he serviceable? Is he a good defensive tackle? I think he's solid. I think that's what you get with Onwuka. You're not going to get a guy that screws up a lot, but you're also not going to get a guy that changes the complete complexion of a game. He'll make plays here and there, but he won't do that. You're going to probably line him next to Cam Horsley, who, again, has been the practice warrior for seems like 3 years now at summer, where every play is like Cam Horsley does this, Cam Horsley does that, Cam Horsley does everything. I still need to see more out of Horsley in a college football game. He had 38 tackles last year and 1.5 tackles for a loss. Now, as a defensive tackle, that's something you want to see more of. You can't go through a whole season with 1.5 tackles. Like, if your job is to push in and get into the backfield to try to tackle a running back, you just with your strength should be able to do that more often than 1.5 times in a season. You have 12 games where you can do that. So Horsley needs to be much more disruptive. And I think with Onwuka next to him, he will get that. But you're going to have to see some other guys step up too. And I think the big one to watch for this year is Chris Banks. Chris Banks is a transfer from Temple. He played last year. He was more of a sporadic player for the Eagles, but played in 12 games. He had 22 tackles. He had 2.5 tackles for loss. Again, there's got to be something here with this defensive line. And this was what Onwuka brought to BC in 2020, is that ability to get some big plays. And honestly, Onwuka only had 2.5, but he also had some sacks in 2020. But you look back at when BC's defense was playing better, what you saw out of the defensive tackle position. I go back to 2018, and you had 2 defensive tackles. You had Tana Carafa and Ray Smith, and they had 8.5 tackles for loss for Tana Carafa and 3 for Ray Smith. That's 11 tackles for loss compared to, what did I just say, like 3 for the defensive tackle position last year. And that's in addition to Zach Allen and Wyatt Ray having 26.5 tackles for loss. So you want to see the defensive line get the ball more. And I think you'll see Isaiah Henderson in there. You may see some of the freshmen too. Or redshirt freshmen come in too. Guys like Nigel Tate, Owen Stodmeyer. Those are 2 guys to watch for. But I need to see more of them at the practice this summer. I can't just go ahead and say they're going to play. But those are some guys that I think should eventually get their spot with BC. Now, on Wednesday's show, we're going to get into Jeff Hafley, as I said. I'm going to talk a little bit about his future with the program, where his ceiling is, where his floor is, kind of look at his career so far with the Eagles. Thank you all for listening. I am AJ Black. You can follow me on Twitter at AJBlack_BC or on YouTube. Find us at Locked On BC. Hit that subscribe button if you have not done so already. It is a huge help. Thank you all for listening. We'll see you again soon.